Well, it's 2 years since Nigeria declared the AfCFTA year. That was 2020. Nigeria declared that year the year of AfCFTA. It's 2 years now. What have we achieved? We do know that countries like Ghana and Kenya have started trading on that platform. Let's get up to date with how Nigeria is doing with Frederick Moises, the co-founder of Jobs Africa Foundation, joining us from Switzerland. Good morning, Mr. Moises. Happy New Year, first of all the way from Switzerland. Good to have you on the show.
Good morning and Happy New Year to you, Ini, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah. Incidentally, we share the same time with Switzerland. So, I mean, you did get into the new year before us. We entered the 2023 at the same time.
Yes, we do. Actually, it's winter time.
Yes.
So we are on the same time, the same time zone.
Yeah. So just before we get into AfCFTA, since this is the first working day for business morning, not for Nigerians anyway, tell us, how would you describe economically there? How would you describe the year 2020 from your perspective in Switzerland? You know about Nigeria.
Well, it's been quite a difficult, let's say, sort of period. As you know, it's a period that coincided with the pandemic, and a lot of supply chains were disrupted throughout the world. And so you've seen countries, really trying to look inward and see what is it that they can do to make sure that they are able to produce a lot of the goods and services within the country itself. And Africa, I think it was some sort of awakening for a number of African countries that are dependent on imports, especially when it comes to food, rice, and a lot of goods that, as your previous speaker was saying, a lot of goods that are necessary to produce within the country itself. So with the disruption of the supply chain, it has been a very difficult time for business, but also it is a time that also created new opportunities, particularly within the digital arena. And so whereas there were challenges, there were opportunities as well.
So now let's delve into the African Continental Free Trade Area. It aims to create a single market for Africa, about 1.4 billion. That's a huge market, combined GDP of about $3 billion. And then on the 30th of May, the AfCFTA officially entered into force. How far so far, 2 years after, for Nigeria, that is?
If you go back to 2018, when many countries, including Nigeria, actually it was 44 of them in Kigali, Rwanda, when the trade agreement was brokered, and 44 countries said, this is what Africa has always needed. We need to move towards a single market, because when you go back to the 60s, the leaders of the time were confronted with a dilemma. Do we keep the colonial borders, or do we tear them down and move straight to the United States of Africa? That was not done, and it was felt that we should move progressively. What has happened is that Africa has been punching below its weight. Just to give an example, based on the figures that you've just given, Africa's contribution to global trade is 3%. A country like Singapore contributes 6% to global trade. The combined GDP of Africa is 3 trillion. The GDP of a country like the UK is 3.2 trillion. So you can see we've really been punching below our weight. And so for us to count and to move towards the aspiration of our forefathers, and this is also in Agenda 2063, moving towards a single market, having a prosperous Africa that is peaceful. You know, you have all the challenges when it comes to conflict within the continent, and the continent that is driven by the people of Africa and who play an important role in the global arena. So I was very pleased to see a country like Nigeria join by ratifying this agreement, because as the #1 economy, it is important that Nigeria leads by example. You did mention that 8 African countries have started the pilot initiative: Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, Egypt. You have Morocco, you have Mauritius, you have Tunisia. All those countries, and Cameroon, all those countries have said, why don't we start ourselves, start trading actually under AfCFTA, where tariffs are removed, and address all the challenges so that we can show the other countries that this is something that can be done.
So I know that some of those details for AfCFTA is that there'll be 90% tariff liberalization, and then there'll be additional 7% for sensitive products. But countries like Nigeria are afraid that they may become dumping ground for some other African countries. What's your take on that?
It is a challenge, and of course, listening to your previous colleague, a lot of countries also depend on the tariff in terms of government revenue. But I think it's a give and take. An integrated Africa, the gains are much more than what we lose. We've got to give something so that we can gain in return. And 3 trillion economy, combined GDP, I think is too small for a continent that has more than 60% of the world's remaining arable land, that has the youngest population. We are 1.4 billion, as you mentioned. By 2050, Africa will have a population of 2.5 billion. So I think what we will gain by ceding some of these benefits, the revenue that we collect, is going to be much more than what we lose. So it's a little sacrifice for the time being, but the gains will be so much that all African countries would want to be part and parcel.
Okay, there's also the issue of sentiment. Sometimes it seems like a lot of Africans do not have confidence in products and services that originate from African countries. They prefer things from outside the country or outside the continent. How do we handle that kind of sentiment?
That is a major challenge. I think we need to change mindset. I know there are a lot of campaigns throughout the continent in terms of African solutions for African problems, buy Africa, build Africa. And if we are able to increase the productive capacity of our company, if we are able to support entrepreneurs within the continent, if we are able to build standards that they are supposed to meet, so that, of course, you avoid the question of dumping that you mentioned. There have been products dumped from other continents. So we need to put in place a standard system, a quality system, so that products are able to meet certain standards for them to be traded within the African continental free trade area. So of course, we have to start from somewhere. We have to improve. We have to have promotional campaigns that it is for our own benefit that we promote products from the continent. We need to change mindset that what comes from abroad is not necessarily of the best quality. Our people can do it. To give an example of the car manufacturing industry, For example, we are seeing a lot of companies in Nigeria, Ghana, in Kenya, going into this production line. And I'm sure by improving the quality of the product, they can not only be able to compete within the countries themselves, but also within the continent. And as your former speaker mentioned, also compete internationally. Because we need to add value to our product.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Frederick Muis, co-founder, Jobs for Africa Foundation. Thank you. Well, 3 years after it came into force, 2 years in Nigeria, we do hope that 2023 we will see more fruits of the AfCFTA, you know, in Africa and, of course, in Nigeria. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Edie.